Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast, where it is about to go 7 p.m. my time, which for those in the Bay is, I think, nearly midnight, and for those on the East Coast of America, right absolute in the middle of the morning. So I'll probably wait a few hours before I post this. I don't think too much will happen in the meantime that will make this any less relevant, but we're about 12 hours removed, basically 12 hours removed from the NBA trade deadline, about 5 to 6 hours removed from the Warriors getting another impressive win against the Pacers in Indiana, a 131-109 win there that backed up an equally impressive 127-104 victory over Philly the night before. The Warriors probably in their best stretch of the season, maybe aside from obviously the start of the season where they began 5-1. They're now won 5 of their last 6. That one loss coming in that devastating, disappointing overtime loss to the Atlanta Hawks where Steph went for 60. In terms of this episode, I kind of want to join together these two games and some thoughts, obviously, on the trade deadline rather than make them two separate things. So we'll see how that goes. We'll start with today's game, I suppose, and Steph Curry backed up what was a very below-par 9-point performance against Philly with 42 points to lead the way with 11 threes against the Pacers today. Started absolutely on fire. It's kind of a throwback to, I don't want to say prime Steph because Steph's still been in his prime and over the last couple of years, but I feel like 5-6 years ago, absolute MVP Steph Curry used to just have these first quarters, these blistering first quarters that would nearly blow a team away kind of on his own. And it feels like more recently, I think there's been a lot of frustration among fans with early game production from Steph and kind of maybe being less aggressive than what you might like him to be, and maybe trying to prioritize getting others going like Clay and Wiggs and maybe those that are in some underwhelming form, so to speak. So it's really great to see Steph come out today after that 9-point performance, 6 of 6 on threes in the first quarter, 18 points. Warriors put up 45 in the first alone, led by 11. Pacers got back into the game, but then Steph rejoined, made his 7th attempt as well. He was 7 of 7 to start. They went on a 12-2 run to end the first half, went up 12. Another impressive third quarter where they really tightened the screws defensively, limited the Pacers to just 18 points in that third quarter, and then were able to kind of still run away with it in the fourth quarter. So back-to-back blowout wins, which is a nice surprise, a real nice element given what we've seen in this Warriors season, which has just been full of clutch games. And I think both of these kind of forecast as such the way the Warriors season's been going. I know Philly were without Embiid yesterday, but the way that Maxey had been playing and just the Warriors' inability to blow out teams. And we saw in that first quarter, even that first half yesterday against Philly, that was a slogfest, an ugly game to watch. Today, much more free-flowing. That's kind of how the Pacers game obviously goes. But Steph, as I said, 42 points, ably supported again by JK and the likes. Let's get into the trade deadline a little bit earlier. I'm pretty tired at the moment, I won't lie, because I woke up at 4 a.m. this morning. I thought, look, I'll try and get a few hours sleep. Last trade deadline, I stayed up the whole night, did not get 1 minute of sleep. And then the trade, James Wiseman for Gary Payton II, basically came in at pretty much 7 a.m. So I could have really just gone to sleep and got up 6 a.m. and I really didn't miss much, at least from a Warrior perspective. So I thought this time around, there's probably not too much is going to happen until the final kind of few hours before the deadline. So I woke up at 4, which was 3 hours before the deadline. Waited around, obviously saw some other deals go down, and then the Warriors. I was getting very nervous about potential Andrew Wiggins trades, obviously, before the deadline, and ultimately nothing happened except for right in the final minute. We had Corey Joseph move to the Pacers, which, if you read my work on Blue Man Hoop, you would have seen that was kind of a trade that had been forecasted with the fact Lester Quinones had earned a spot in the rotation over Joseph in recent games. One, he'd earned that on merit, and I can get into Lester later. He has played very well over these last 4 or 5 games. But it's also an idea that, hey, if they want to shave some money here, save some luxury tax payments, they can trade Corey Joseph and then sign Lester Quinones to a standard contract. And I think the Athletics' John Holland just said or reported that would save them about $11 million in luxury tax payments. So that was a trade that was kind of expected to happen in the end. Kind of ironic that they were playing the Pacers today in that game. And Corey Joseph got waived. So he's now looking for a new NBA team. The Warriors down to 13 men on the roster. But I was getting nervous about some potential Wiggins trades because we've heard about the kind of Milwaukee interest over the last few days, the Dallas interest. Once the Mavericks got PJ Washington, which I think is a pretty good deal for them, once they got him, they were kind of out of the picture for Wiggins, and it was really down to the Bucks. And there was speculation right up until the final minute. And I guess for a lot of fans, there's some frustration about the Warriors' inactivity, their lack of moves here before the deadline. It's hard for me, I think, to complain about what the Warriors did or didn't do without knowing full well what they potentially missed out on. And that's hard. Like the hard thing for me, I had, mates message me today, what are the Warriors doing? Why aren't they doing anything? Having a crack at Mike Dunleavy, wake up Mike, that kind of thing. You just don't know what was on the table. And Steve Kerr said a couple of days ago, they're not a desperate team. They're not a team that has to make a move and overpay for someone who's not necessarily going to lift them too far up the seedings necessarily. And you see some of the reports today, like, did you want the Warriors to trade Jonathan Kuminga for Alex Caruso just for the sake of making a trade? Absolutely not. I'll tell you what, this would have been an entertaining episode if the Wiggins deal went down to the Bucks, where that was kind of reported or suggested at least in regard to Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, and Campaign or Jay Crowder, one of those two. If they did a 1-for-3 trade, Wiggins for Portis, Connaughton, and Campaign, I would have lost my shit. Pardon the language. I would have lost it. And I was so nervous that if I got a tweet from Woj or Shams in that final 10 minutes saying that, I mean, at that point, Campaign had been traded for Pat Bev, but if it was Jay Crowder or whoever, or salary fill or whatever it was, I would have lost it. I could not think of anything worse. And so I think you can say, the Warriors should have done something, and it could have been a lot better by, acquiring someone. But I think it could have also been a lot worse by looking desperate, by sending out Wiggins for little value in return, like that Portis package, or, overpaying for an Alex Caruso, which, thankfully and rightfully, Mike Dunleavy Jr., by the sounds of it, laughed off the Bulls' request for Jonathan Kuminga, which JK's, emerged into a star player, and the Warriors are not giving him up for anything less than a multi-time All-Star, genuine superstar, you could say, really. And Alex Caruso is a very good player, very impactful player to winning. He's a role player at the end of the day. He's a role player, and as good as he would be for the Warriors. And I think there was some talk, I don't know how true it is, there's some talk on Twitter about potentially the Warriors offered some kind of package of GP2, Moody, TJD, and a pick, which I think is a pretty good deal if I'm Chicago. Like, I think that's a really good package. It's also a package that I wouldn't have minded from a Warrior perspective, because I still look at the game today and I still have some question marks. As impressive as it was, I still have some question marks about the rotation going forward. But in terms of the trade discussion, like, you can't just make a trade for the sake of it. So in regards to today's game, I love the energy they played with. They just came out kind of opposite to the Philly game yesterday, where I tweeted out in the first quarter yesterday, I said they look really flat and they look tired. And you could have, forgiven them for coming out today and kind of laying an egg and being disappointing, because you got to remember, this was their 5th game in 7 days. Yesterday was their 4th game in 6 days. This is the end of a 5-game road trip in 7 days. That's why I think these 2 games, especially today, against a good Pacers team who over 500 record, one of the best offenses in the NBA, Tyrese Halliburton on a minutes restriction, yes, but still out there. Pascal Siakam just traded. This is a good Pacers team, and the Warriors were up for it straight away. And Steph led the way, but I just love the energy they played with. They were up for it. I think the Pacers kind of make you play like that, and I think they're actually a pretty good matchup for the Warriors, because the Warriors are at their best when they're playing with pace, when they're getting threes up, when they can get, Wiggs and JK going downhill in transition and playing quick. So I think it actually suits Golden State. Like, Miles Turner's not going to necessarily exploit Draymond in any way inside, because he likes to live out in the perimeter as a 3-point shooting threat as a center. So I think the Indiana's a pretty good matchup for Golden State. But you look at some of the rotation stuff here, and Steph played well, yes, but he was hardly a one-man show. And like that bench unit late third quarter, early fourth quarter that kind of extended the lead for the Warriors. They just played hard. They played quick and they played hard, crashed the boards. So you had the likes of JK obviously leading the second unit, but Pod's out there. Lester Quinones, Guy Santos, Dario Saric at the 5. Like, they were playing hard. They were playing quick. And that's a really kind of vibrant, energetic group. And now, having not made a move, we're going to get Chris Paul back here probably after the post All-Star break, I should say. And I'm not going to lie, I'm nervous. I'm really nervous about what this Warrior second unit is going to look like, and in general, what this Warrior team is going to look like. Because so much of the early part of the season, we had to watch Chris Paul walk the ball up the floor, to the point where I think he got called for an 8-second violation once, just under no defensive pressure at all, just walking the ball up. And I got pretty sick of it. And I know Chris Paul's had so much success. He's one of the best point guards of all time. The methodical way he plays is and has been excellent across his 19-year career. But the way that the Warriors want to play, I still, as good as Chris Paul, like, I've got nothing against Chris Paul. I've got something against the way he plays and the way he fits into this Warrior system. As good as he was in the early part of the season, where he probably won some games for the Warriors. But I just think this seems like Golden State basketball. This seems sustainable. This seems like what won them multiple championships over the last, 4 championships over the last 9 years. This seems like closer to the best of the Warriors than early part of the season when they were still winning games, but it just felt like there's just a clearly different way they played with Chris Paul on the floor. And I'm just concerned that, like, how is he going to use CP3 in that second unit when you've got JK out there, when you've got Pods who, like, Pods gets the ball, whether it's off an inbounds or off a rebound, and he pushes. Lester Quinones, same thing. You go watch Lester today. He grabs the rebound or he gets the inbounds, whatever it is, and he just immediately pushes the ball to half court. Even if there's nothing there, he pushes the ball up to half court. If there's something there, you go for it. If there's not, then you run your set. That's fine. But you can literally, some of these teams are so bad defensively, like, you can get fast break buckets off a make in some of these instances. And I just don't think with Chris Paul, I don't think the Warriors play in a way that is going to fully maximize the rest of their roster. And so I'm concerned with him coming back. I'm concerned with Steve leaning into him, not just in obviously the non-Steph minutes, but playing like 3-guard lineups with, those two and Clay out there, or, those two and Pods out there, whatever it is, more 3-guard lineups. I think they've had some success here because they've gone away from 3-guard lineups, and, they've gone to Guy Santos, for example, who, is the last player on the roster, literally the last player on the roster. But you know what? He's 6'7", 6'8". He's big. He crashes the boards. He plays with energy. He's willing to dive on the ground. He's got size, so he can defend a little bit. Like, I think the units, like the second unit, even with a lack of talent, has just been really productive based on the way they play and the style they play, which is, quick, up-tempo. And I don't know. I'm just worried about the Chris Paul minutes. I'm worried that this might sound a bit over the top, but I'm worried that he's going to come back and hijack the second unit. And to me, I look at that second unit and I think that's Jonathan Kuminga's unit. Now, I know it's not going to work all the time. I know there's been stretches even today and yesterday where, JK maybe pushes the buttons a little bit too much and overplays a little bit. But to me, it's his unit. He's the second best scorer on this team now. There's no doubt about that. And I think for me, you give him the scoring responsibility in that second unit. Clay can be part of it as well. Clay can be a catch and shoot threat. He can be a secondary option outside JK. And I still think there's probably a dynamic there that needs to be figured out where, especially across some of Clay's struggles against Atlanta specifically, there were some times where Clay's jacking shots in the second unit where you're like, hey, buddy, I know you're a 5-time All-Star. You are a top 5 player in franchise history. There's a 21-year-old here right now who's just flat out a better offensive player than you, and he's the guy in this second unit. You're the secondary guy. And then, of course, you got Pods, who can be that organizer, that facilitator for those two guys. And as I said, push the brake, run the floor, and you've got a unit out there that works. And I'm just concerned about Chris Paul in that. And obviously he's going to be part of it, and he's going to run the second unit. But we'll just wait and see how it happens, because I struggle to see a way in which Chris Paul is all of a sudden, getting an inbounds pass of a mate from the other team and just running the ball straight to half court. He's just not going to do that. He's just not. I'm also concerned about just heavy pick and roll, pick and pop with him and Dario Saric. Like, it worked. I was a big advocate, and it was a big positive, the Chris Paul Dario Saric combination early in the season. What didn't work was JK in that, and JK being cast off as just a spot-up corner guy or spot-up wing guy, just standing there doing nothing while Chris Paul and Dario Saric run their action. I'm sorry to say again, Jonathan Kuminga is your guy in that second unit. He should not be standing on the wing, standing in the corner, doing nothing as a spot-up guy. Just shouldn't. So I'm just worried about how this is going to work, and hopefully they can have a chat to CP about how they want him to play or whatever it is. There's also going to be, how many minutes is he going to play? Should he be playing at all outside the non-Steph Curry minutes? Is there a way in which Chris Paul comes back and he's a 15-minute per game player? Is there? I don't know. And so, again, this comes back to the trade deadline, where you've got to look like these last 9 games, which actually coincides with since they've come back after the tragic Decky passing, which also kind of correlates with Draymond coming back in. I know he played that one game in Memphis before Decky's passing, which, if we eliminate that out of the equation, the last 9 games since return, they're 6-3, could easily be 9-0. They are second in offense during that stretch, and they are 6th in defense during that stretch. And they are equal first in net rating with the Cavs, who are the most informed team in the league right now. They're 8-1 over the last 9 games. They've got some ridiculous 14-20 in their last 16 or whatever else. The Warriors over the last 9 games, one of the best teams in the league. A top 2 team in the league if you just go by net rating. Now, I know record 6-3. That's 2 1-point losses, a game that went to double overtime, and another game that went to overtime where they lost by 7. Could easily be 9-0 in their last 9 games. And so that's why before this trade deadline, my whole thought was I do not want to trade Andrew Wiggins. That was my biggest thought. I just do not want to trade Andrew Wiggins because I know they are not going to get the value back that you could potentially get if Wiggs just ups his game a little bit, which is what we've seen here over the last couple of weeks. So I was a big advocate, do not trade Andrew Wiggins, as much as the speculation continued to hint that he was the Warrior in most discussions. That made me really nervous because you're not going to get the value back for him, and he is your number 1 perimeter defender, and we'll get into that in a second as well. So I was all for, the whole time I was all for, they're doing this without CP3. They've been doing this without Moses Moody, who I still question, where is his spot in the rotation right now? Where is his spot in the bench unit? I just do not see it. And so to me, Chris Paul was a guy, $30.8 million contract. You could give him up for some size, some extra insurance in the big man department, maybe some more defensive depth, because I'm not sure how much you can rely on Gary Payton II's health going forward. Chris Paul, Moses Moody, and you know what? If you have to throw in one or both of your first round picks, 2026 and 2028, so be it. Now, there is some caveats on that. So, first of all, you need it if you're going to give up CP3, Moody, and 2 picks. You need to get nearly an all-star player back, and that's why I was always, making a case for if they can get into the conversation. DeJounte Murray makes sense to me because he's the caliber of player who has been an all-star once and is around, he's the tier below an all-star. The other thing with DeJounte Murray is that he was under contract for 4 years, which probably meant that Joe Laker was never going to approve taking on extra salary past CP3's non-guaranteed for next season. So Joe Laker was probably never going to do that. But in fairness, credit to Joe Laker for not, forcing the Warriors into doing a salary dump in terms of trading Wiggins or something and saying, hey, I've got a $400 million payroll for a team that's currently 11th. I do not want that. Get rid of Wiggins, get rid of Paul, cut down the roster here in some way. So credit to him for that. I don't think he would have wanted to take on extra salary going forward. But if he had, then I think DeJounte Murray would have been the best option because he's under contract for 4 years and he's a high-quality player. And you needed that combination, especially if you're going to give up picks in 2026 and 2028, which I know it completely reduces your flexibility and your optionality going forward. But with how JK is looking and with how Pods is looking, I think you can be a lot more confident, and to a lesser extent, TJD as well. If you're going to make sure you're going to hold on to those three guys, then I think you can be a little bit more comfortable with trading 2026 and 2028 first round picks rather than, before this JK emergence where you think, oh, we cannot give up those picks because like Steph's going to be old, or he's going to be like Steph's, 2 years away? Steph's going to be 38 and 40 by that time. And there's a good chance we're a lottery team and we're giving up top 10, top 5, who knows, top 3 picks if they're unprotected in those years. And you're really nervous to do that for DeJounte Murray, for example, or anyone around that caliber of player. So I got that kind of unease about doing that. But I think with what JK is showing in terms of him being a future star in this league, if not close to a star already, I think you could be a little bit more open and a little bit more comfortable with trading those first round picks, given how JK's looked and given how Pods has looked as well. So I would have liked them to see what CP3, Moody, and a couple of picks would have got, but I understand you would have needed a high caliber player like DeJounte Murray to be able to do that. And equally, you would have needed a player to be under contract for multiple more years, because you're not going to give up that kind of package for a guy on an expiring contract. And I also do understand that Joe Lacob wouldn't have wanted to take on long-term money. So I understand that it just was almost impossible to do. And I'm not going to complain too much about it, because I don't know who was potentially, I don't know if they had conversations with DeJounte or with the Hawks about DeJounte Murray, how far that got, what else would have had to have been involved, because obviously on the Atlanta side, DeJounte is only making $18 million this season. They would have needed another, like a Capella, which I would have liked. Capella and Murray for Paul, Moody, and a couple of picks, and maybe whatever it took. Not whatever it took, but something in that ballpark. You know what I mean? So I would have liked that. Capella gives you size inside. I look at it now, and they're going to have the same issues as they did earlier in the season, where there's 12 guys that can play, and you only really want to play 9 or 10. If they do make the playoffs, that might limit to 8. And I can guarantee you, Moody is going to get DMPs here soon. Moses Moody is going to get DMPs here soon. I can guarantee it. And the fan base will be up in arms. How can Moses Moody get a DMP? And you know what? I agree. But you tell me who he should be playing over, especially when GP2 comes back, which sounds like it's going to be the next, potentially before the All-Star break. I think they've got 4 games to go. There's going to be DMPs for Moses Moody. You know what? Lester Quinones and Guy Santos have played well, and they're going to get DMPs. And the fact that I even have to question it's like, could they actually still be in the rotation? The fact that I even have to question that just goes to show how impressive they've been, because it's the last guy on the roster and a guy that's on a 2-way currently, albeit he might be on a standard deal soon. But the fact you even have to question that is, a huge credit to them and how well they've played. Like Guy, a couple of huge, Pacers were making a little bit of a run today, and Guy Santos just made back-to-back threes. And you're like, well, there goes that Pacers run. And he has a career-high 13 points, a career-high 8 rebounds. As I said before, he's just big. He can battle defensively. He's going to crash the glass. Showed today that he can make a couple of threes. He's got... Steve, compared him the other day to Juan Toscano-Anderson, which I see. And Juan was a good player there for a couple of years, a really impactful, valuable player for the Warriors. Early days, yes, but we've also got Guy is, 22 years old, maybe? He's got a lot more upside than JTA had. JTA, when he was impactful for the Warriors, he had quite the career behind him, not at the NBA level, but, extensive experience, and was, became an NBA player at the age of, 28, 29. Rather than, Guy now, as I say, he's 22 years old. He's got obviously a lot more growth and improvement left in him. And if he's having these kind of little spurts of impact now, Warriors might have a player in their hands there that can be, a rotation player moving forward. Again, I think he's going to be out of the rotation here in the next couple of games, and we probably won't see him again for the rest of the season. But you can kind of throw him in there and he's going to be okay. And that's a credit to him. The fact that he can look like a competent-ish NBA player so early in his career with so much development left in his game, credit to him. So, yeah, the CP3 stuff, the Moody stuff, I just struggle to see where that fits. And then there's the question of like the whole with Draymond starting, which is, you can say it's been a stroke of genius from Steve, and maybe he deserves some credit, but it did make a lot of sense at the time, and it clearly the front court trio of Wiggins, Kuminga, and Draymond quickly became the best front court trio the Warriors have out of all the different combinations that they've tried this season. But it does mean, obviously, that you've got Saric, Looney, TJD, each as options coming off the bench. And that's why I wondered, could they have got a big man at the deadline where maybe you got rid of one or two of those guys and just got an upgrade? Got an upgrade to say, all right, he's our backup big. I don't know if like Andre Drummond would have been that guy where, like, is Andre Drummond a better player than Loon? Based on this season, he probably is, but I'm not sure Steve's necessarily going to see it that way. So I don't know if there was another, like Kelly Olynyk was a guy they were linked with in the last 24 hours. He would have been someone that you could come in and say, you know what, Kelly Olynyk is a better player. Like he's a kind of similar type to Dario with a bit more stoutness on defense. Like he's an upgrade on Dario. He's different, but he's better than Looney. He's different, but he's better than TJD. He's a guy that you could have brought in and said, he's just our backup center. He just is. He's better than those other three guys. And if it took Looney to get him, maybe you would have tried to do that. If it was Looney and Moody for Kelly Olynyk, maybe that's a move I would have made. And again, it's a kind of a cold-hearted decision on Looney because he's been such a leader in the locker room over his career and especially in the last few years. But that's the kind of move where, as I said again, the Warriors are going to have some rotation questions here where Steve's not necessarily going to get it right and the fans are going to be up in arms. But I know for me personally, I'm prepared to put my hand up and say it's going to be a tough job. It's as it was earlier in the season. I'm going to forgive him a little bit because Steve's going to make mistakes because he's got so many questions. Like, who do you play in what lineups? How many minutes do you play them for? At least the one thing the Warriors can hold on to now is they have a lineup, a starting lineup, or at least a core four with Steph, Wiggs, JK, Draymond. They have a core four. Like, those guys just play 30-plus minutes. Those guys just play 30-plus minutes, and then you work the rest out, which is a lot easier than saying, which was also the issue at Sutton, I don't know what the best five is. I don't know what the best five is. Wiggins one night plays 30. The other night he plays 18. Kuminga plays 28 one night. The next minute he plays 15. Like, all this kind of jumbling around with the starting lineup. At least you got a set starting lineup now. You got a starting lineup that bloody works. And now you just got to sort out what you're doing with the bench, which is okay because, you know what? It's 12, 15, 18 minutes a night that you got to try and sort out. Hopefully they do. Again, is he going to be eager to play Chris Paul 25 minutes a game? If he is, I'm going to get pissed off. I'm going to get real pissed off if Chris Paul comes back and he goes back to playing 25, 30 minutes because it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work as well as what this has been working over the last 9 games where they are the second best team in the league by net rating or equal first in net rating over the last 9 games. It just ain't going to work. And Chris Paul's stature as a player across his career, like he has earned the opportunity to try and win a championship and still be an impactful player in a championship team, still win 25 minutes. And I think Chris Paul could go to a number of other teams and still play 25 minutes a game. I just don't think with the way the Warriors want to play and how good they've been recently that he does that with Golden State. And that's, again, back to the trade deadline. I would have just liked to see what you could have got with Chris Paul. And again, they've got flexibility this offseason, which is good. They can relook at a Wiggins trade if things, don't quite go right here. CP3, $30 million player option for next season. They've got some optionality with there where they can trade him for kind of anyone and then they can guarantee his salary up to the incoming player. They've still got those picks that I spoke about. They're still going to have Moody, although Moody, maybe it's a case of like Moody's just got no value now. He's stuck in a hole, and I feel so bad for him. He's stuck because he's got no value, so the Warriors really don't want to trade him because he's a former lottery pick. got to remember the last 2 games before he got injured, he had back-to-back 21-point games. The Warriors still value him, but do they value him highly enough to be playing 15, 20 minutes a game? I don't think so. And so I think Moses deserved to get traded. Just for the sake of just get him to a team that will give him opportunity, because you are starving him of opportunity, and in the process, you are potentially costing the guy tens of millions of dollars on his next contract. And I spoke about it before, like you did with JK, where a month ago, JK's next contract was looking at maybe $40 to $60 million. Now he's looking at anything from 100 or max. Literally. Like, Jonathan Kuminga's last month, even his last couple of weeks, has made the guy $60 to $70 to $80 million. It's quite incredible, but that's what it is. And I'm not saying Moses probably isn't going to get to a stage where he's a $100 million player, but he could go from being a $30 to $40 million player to a $50 to $60 million player, just with some extra opportunity, which the Warriors at the moment cannot afford. Back on just this kind of Dario Looney TJD combination off the bench. Saric scares me. Since he had those couple of games with illness, his game time's been going down a little bit. Hasn't been quite playing as well. And then, it's really funny watching Dario. It's genuinely funny because he comes on the floor today in the first quarter and he's an absolute sieve defensively and just gives up bucket after bucket. And then he might have a weird turnover where you're just like, what are we doing? What are we honestly doing? But then he'll make a couple of threes. He'll have a pick and pop and knock down a three. Then he'll make a nice pass for a dime. Then he'll actually put the ball on the floor, which is unique for a big man. And then he'll make an N1 layup off the bounce. And you're like, oh yeah, this is why he's out there. Because he gives up buckets for fun defensively, but he actually does make them up on the other end. And so he's a funny player to watch in that aspect. I don't know how much you want him to be playing come playoff time, where the game kind of slows down a bit and defense becomes a premium. So again, if Dario was a guy that had value to other teams, I wouldn't have been against moving him. I wouldn't have been against moving Loon. TJD, if TJD got you an impactful piece, I know I've spoke relentlessly about how good his contract is, and I think he would have had value to teams. There's been early redrafts here where he's gone in the lottery based on what he's done this season. He was the 57th overall pick. He goes, if there's a redraft tomorrow, he goes at least top 20, if not in the lottery. And so he would have had value to teams. And you know what? If it got you Caruso, GP2's health, along with the lack of opportunity with Moody and TJD, if that could have actually got you Caruso, I would have done it. And I think maybe that's what they offered. Chicago said no, and that's their prerogative. I feel like that would have been a reasonable deal for the Bulls, just given where they're at the moment, where they're kind of stuck in no man's land. You could argue to say the Warriors are as well, but the Warriors have Steph Curry. They've kind of can go into every game having some sort of chance. But it's just going to be interesting to see what they do with the Saric Looney TJD combo going forward, because TJD here hasn't done a whole lot wrong to necessarily just be getting DNPs. Now he's just getting DNPs. He is. And I don't think he's done a whole lot wrong to deserve that. I also think the way he plays is really good for the kind of athletic, runs the floor. I think that works well in a second unit with JK and Pods. I've said it all along. I know, and again, credit to Steve for starting to trust some of these young guys a little bit more. I just don't think he wants to play Pods, JK, and TJD in the same lineup. I just don't think he does. Which is actually, maybe he does in some of these when there's a few injuries, because to be fair, he's playing lineups with Pods, Quinones, Santos, and JK. So in fairness, he's doing that. But once there's a full rotation, I think he wants the experience out there that Loon brings, that Dario brings. Obviously, CP3 is going to be out there, Clay potentially in some of these lineups. So it's just going to be interesting to see how the second unit works, how the kind of big rotation works there as well, because Steve has come out and said, Draymond is a 5. He's primarily a 5. That's where he's going to play. And, you're probably going to have to play Draymond a lot with Dario just because of the defensive issues with Dario there. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the rotation moving forward. Just before I finish off here, I just want to speak about Wiggs, because obviously, so he doesn't get moved. Thankfully, I think, for the reasons I spoke about before, just him and Clay, because there's been so much talk about those two for the entirety of the season, and even more so in the last few days, mainly because Wiggs obviously with the trade speculation, and then Clay just had a couple of absolutely awful games after he missed that one game with illness. A couple of awful ones. Had a good one against Philly in the first night of the back-to-back, and then it was a random late out with illness on his birthday here against Indiana. Maybe a few too many beers. I don't know. I also, maybe it's just a case of he wasn't quite over the illness from last week, and maybe that's what, second night back to back, maybe he was a bit worn down by that. I don't know. His play would kind of suggest that he still wasn't quite over the illness, although, as I said, he was good against Philly. I just want to kind of adjust the expectations somewhat on both Wiggs and Clay. I'm sick, absolutely sick of people saying Clay's washed because he's not the guy he was pre-injuries. Well, of course, he had two of the worst leg injuries an athlete can ever have. Of course, he's not the same player. And I've had mates talking to me the last few days, especially after that Atlanta game, even the Brooklyn game, he wasn't great either. I've had mates saying, could the Warriors get him on a minimum next season? I even had a mate say to me, is there a chance he retires? He looks so despondent on the floor. Is there a chance he retires? I'm just like, shut up. Just shut the hell up. He's not going on a minimum. He's still, can we just fast forward 12 months? And Clay is going to be on a $15 to $20 million contract. He's going to be averaging 15 to 18 points a game, and he's going to be shooting 40% from three, and everything's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. It really is. At the moment, he's making $43.2 million. Is he absolutely overpaid? Of course, by a long way. He should be getting half that. But it just is what it is. We play out the season, see how it goes. Hopefully he comes back on somewhere between $15 and $20 million a season for maybe 3 years. He averages 15 to 18 points a game next season. He's still a starter. That's the other thing that frustrates me. People saying, well, he needs to go back to the bench 6 minutes. No, just let him play with Steph and Draymond. It's fine. Honestly, it's fine. Okay? Maybe, you might close with Pod some games. That's also fine. Clay's just going to have to accept that. Yes, he's going to have to accept his role a little bit better here, but some of the overreaction stuff. The dude averaged 20 points in January on over 40% shooting from three. He averaged over 18 points a game in December on 40% shooting from three. Dude has 3 bad games after being sick for a game, and we're all I'm biased because Clay's my favorite player in NBA history, but some of the stuff, when did Clay all of a sudden become one of the most hated players in the league? When did that happen? I know some of his attitude stuff in the last couple of years, I know people get frustrated by that and annoyed by that, but can you not understand the guy is, trying to get back to what he was before, and he's had his prime of his career absolutely destroyed by 2 major leg injuries? Can we just not understand that for a second? Can we not have some sympathy, some human sympathy for 2 seconds? Anyway, it boggles my mind. Anyway, just on him and Wiggins, you've got to understand now that Clay is not going to be pre-injury Clay. Heck, Clay doesn't have to be last season Clay, where he was 21.5 points per game or whatever it was on 42% three-point shooting. Does not have to be that guy. Andrew Wiggins, 18 to 20-point guy, all-star in 2022, second best player on the championship team. You know what? Doesn't need to be that guy. We're speaking about, can Wiggs get back to 2022 all-star form, second best player on the championship? Can he get back to that? You know what? He doesn't have to. He legitimately does not have to. We are speaking about the 2 guys that are the 4th and 5th best player on the team now. And you know what? In 12 months' time, they might be the 5th and the 6th, depending on how Pods develops. Although I'd like to think Wiggs would still be, Wiggs is 28. I'd like to think he's still the 4th best player on the team. Maybe he gets back up to being the 3rd best player on the team ahead of Draymond at some stage, given Draymond's 33 years of age. But we've got to kind of base our expectations on that. They're the 4th and 5th best players on the team. And that's kind of the responsibility that they should bear. And not think that, JK's emerged into this 20-plus point per game scorer and has been unbelievable, while still retaining the idea that Wiggins and Clay are each going to average 18 to 20 points a game. No, JK's ascension into being the second best scorer on this team is going to take shots away from Wiggs and Clay. So I actually couldn't really care how much those guys average. I care about the efficiency. And so you look at Andrew Wiggins today. Like, go back to yesterday: 21 points, 10 rebounds. Maybe his best game for this, but maybe his best two-way game for the season, which would have been super ironic if they traded him today on the back of that. Like, arguably his best game of the season, then they trade him. It really wasn't going to happen after that. I know one game's not going to mean anything, but you couldn't have traded him after that. And then you fast forward to today, 7 points in the first quarter, and then only makes 2 buckets after that. Finishes with 11 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. And you look at if you didn't watch the game, you look at the box score and you think, ugh, average Wiggs game. Like, not great. Like, hopefully he's got to be better than that. No, no, I don't think so. I thought it was a great Wiggs game, personally. You watch that game. So yesterday he keeps Tyrese Maxey to 5 of 14 shooting for 12 points, and today he keeps Tyrese Halliburton to was it 7 points on 2 of 7 shooting, whatever it was, 2 of 7 shooting. Like, that's a good Wiggs game today. 11 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, made the right reads offensively. 5 of 10 shooting is fine. 5 assists with 0 turnovers is really good. Like, really good Wiggs game. And that's why I think we've got to adjust our expectations here to couldn't care less about what the guy's doing scoring-wise necessarily. He doesn't need to be the 18 to 20 point per game scorer that the Warriors once needed because they've got JK for that. Right now, Wiggs, first and foremost, his responsibility is as the number one perimeter defender on this team. That is his number one responsibility. And so if he can keep the lead guard, lead wing, whatever, to a below average game by their standards, which in the last 2 games against Maxey and Halliburton, they have been well below their normal average. If he can do that and just be efficient enough offensively and not have, disastrous shooting games where he's like 2 of 10, 1 of 6 from 3-point range. If he can just be efficient enough, like today, 5 of 10, 1 of 3, fine. Good game. Like, that's impactful to winning. And that's the thing here. Like, you've got to base the expectation not on what he was a couple of years ago in 2022, but on his new role, on what his responsibility on this roster really is, which, as I said, is the number one perimeter defender, and just take him for what this version of Andrew Wiggins is. And maybe you say, he's overpaid. He's still got 3 years remaining on his contract at nearly $90 million. Maybe you say he's overpaid, but again, if he can become an elite perimeter defender again, and he's efficient enough on offense and gives you 15 points a game, that's average of 15 points per game. You know what? He's going to have games yesterday where he goes for 21. He's going to have games today where he goes for 11. That's just kind of how defenses are going to guard Steph, how defenses are going to guard JK. He's going to have, his opportunities are going to kind of come in and out somewhat. But if he can just average 15 points for the season on 45 to 48% shooting from the floor, get back to mid to high 30s from 3, cool. That's great. And that'll lead to winning. I promise you that will lead to winning with what Steph is still doing, what JK is now doing, what Draymond is back doing. That'll be fine. And the same goes for Clay. Doesn't need to be 18, 20 points per game. If he's 15 points per game with 40% from 3, great. That's fine. And so we just got to adjust the expectations here and think that these guys, they're not going to get back to being 18 to 20 points because the Warriors don't need them to be. They don't need them to be. So we'll finish up there. The next move for the Warriors, just quickly, so they trade Joseph, means they've got 13 men on the roster. A signing will come here soon. So the presumption or the assumption here is that Lester Quinones will get converted to a standard contract. That saves the Warriors millions in luxury tax payments, which is important, obviously. They obviously saved a heap of money with Draymond's huge suspensions. What he missed 21 games with suspension, which he didn't get paid for. So they saved a heap of money there. So as I said at the start of the episode, you could kind of forecast this Joseph trade coming. However, I think one thing to note is there a guy in the buyout market now that might be worth paying that money back, those luxury tax savings that they could get by signing Quinones? Could you just forego that and say, you know what, there's actually a guy on the buyout market who we can sign to a minimum and we think he can be an impactful piece for the rest of the season and potentially even into the playoffs should we make it as well? Is there a guy out there? And there's a lot of guys today that were waived or bought out, whatever it is, by their team. it's also important to acknowledge that the Warriors cannot sign a guy on the buyout market who made more than the mid-level exception on his previous contract. So I've seen a lot of Warrior fans, Spencer Dinwiddie, go get Spencer Dinwiddie. No, the Warriors cannot do that. He made more than the mid-level exception. I think there's 7 or 8 teams in the league, obviously over the second tax apron, who cannot do that. So it's got to be a guy basically under $12 million on his previous contract. So who could that be? I think Otto Porter Jr. is a big one now. I think Warrior fans like the idea of that because OPJ was, so impactful to the 2022 championship run. He just can't stay on the floor. He cannot. And so I have serious question marks about if the Warriors would even do that. Some of the other, Thaddeus Young, again, is it worth it? I don't know. Seth Curry. If Seth Curry is... There's always been the dream of the Curry brothers playing together. If Seth Curry is bought out after his trade to the Charlotte Hornets, could he be a buyout option? Potentially. Joe Harris is a shooter. Those guys, I'm sorry. Seth maybe a little bit less so than Joe Harris, but Joe Harris, his fall off, and I think it's the ankle injury that's really getting to him. So again, it's probably not him necessarily. It's just the injuries that he's been through. I have some sympathy there for him, absolutely. He's just not the player that he once was. And he's just not a player. He couldn't get minutes for Detroit. He's literally a guy who you might throw in there at the end of the first half when there's 10 seconds left just for one offensive possession. I don't think he's playing outside of that. Seth Curry, would he play? Warriors are just too, I just think the Warriors have got 11, 12 guys that play that I think ultimately they'll just say, we've got too many rotation question marks as it is. If we sign one of these buyout guys, they're just going to add to the rotation questions. Let's sign Lester Quinones. Let's do that. We save millions of dollars. We've actually seen that Lester can play a bit. Lester's been super impressive, and he's another one who might have an NBA future here. I spoke about him quite a bit over the offseason, obviously with what he did in Summer League. He was pretty disappointing for the Dominican Republic at the World Cup. But these last 4 or 5 games here, he just does a bit of everything. The one thing I've really been impressed with is his perimeter defense. He's Steve's thrown him on some guys here. I think he guarded Maxey a bit yesterday. He was guarding Trae Young at the end of that Hawks game once Wiggs was out with the injury, and JK obviously was not ejected but fouled out. He was guarding Trae Young, and I'm not saying Trae Young went off in the second half, but the fact that he's getting the responsibility to do that, I think just goes to show you how respected his defense is by Steve and the coaching staff. And offensively, he can handle the ball a bit. He had 5 assists today. He can play make a little bit. It's funny, his 3-point shot either goes in or it misses by a mile. I feel like there's very few 3-point attempts from Lester Quinones that are close but don't go in. They either go in or he misses by a long way. But I think he's shooting 45% from 3 over these last 5 games. So he's a good 3-point shooter. He just does stuff. He's a good rebounder for a guard as well. But just does stuff. And so I think ultimately you just give him the standard contract because there's no one out there that is going to be impactful enough to be saying, yep, he automatically comes in and he's top 9 definite in our rotation. A healthy Otto Porter Jr., maybe. Maybe he is. But you're just not getting that. And he hasn't been able to get on the floor, and when he just hasn't been that same impactful piece. So that's, I suppose, the last thing to look for from a roster standpoint over these next couple of weeks. Is there a guy on the buyout market that becomes available that moves the needle for them? And if not, Lester Quinones is probably going to get that final roster spot to go with Guy Santos as well. And I think the Warriors, as I said, will be a lot more comfortable with that, knowing that these two guys can actually play. They're not going to play much down the second half of the season. But if there's a couple of injuries, which is probably bound to be, if there's foul trouble maybe in some of these games, they can play and they're not going to be a disaster. And I think that's been a positive sign over these last few games. Anyway, quite a long episode just talking through these last 2 impressive wins in the trade deadline. Obviously, if you've got through the over 45 minutes, thank you very much for listening, or if you've been watching on the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed already, that would be greatly appreciated. Trying to close in on 400 subscribers here. Thanks very much for all the ongoing support. To many of you, it's much appreciated. If you want to get in contact with me, at POC252, that's POK252 on Twitter. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Got any comments on the last two victories, on what the Warriors did or didn't do at the trade deadline, what you think they should have done, then leave a comment below on the YouTube video, or as I said, you can post to me on Twitter. That would be great. Other than that, guys, enjoy your weekend ahead. I'll be back shortly. The Warriors play the Phoenix Suns. Big game on Saturday back at Shea Center. They've got some momentum here. They've got some momentum. Can they continue it on? The Phoenix Suns looking pretty good as well. They're 31-21 on the season. So another big game for the Warriors. They've lost all three meetings to the Suns this season. So we need to get one. Surely. But otherwise, guys, have a great weekend. Cheers.